Hello, my name is Dan Humberg. I represent harvestfires.com, and this is an instructional video to help anyone who is looking at the installation of the tin kit as a part of a Firestop system on, in this case, on a Case Model 7120 combine. I have the 3D CAD model up in front of us, and we can look at this to illustrate and show the individual pieces of tin that go into the assembly. You can see the tabs on the tin, and it will help you to understand as you start to fold that tin what direction to fold tabs and things like that. There is a separate video on how to assemble or how to fold the tin for this kit, but it might be helpful to watch this video first and then have an idea about how to do that before you tackle that video with the individual pieces of tin and how to bend them. So let's look at this. First of all, we can just um, or talk about the orientation of this. If I'm looking on the top of this, I'd have the engine up above here, the valve cover. I'm looking down, the exhaust manifold for the machine would be located inside this part of the enclosure. The exhaust turbine from the turbocharger would be located inside this large box here. And then this zigzag pipe here is going to follow the exhaust pipe up to the muffler on the machine. What's not shown, this is only the tin, what doesn't show is that you've got a compressor turbine that's right here and a big black rubber air line leading into that, and we've got a line leaving that compressor turbine out this way, and there's an oil line that runs up through here to supply oil to the turbocharger bearing, and there's a return line to take the oil away from the bearing and back to the crankcase through there. We have the turbocharger bearing that runs in between the compressor and the exhaust turbine through that opening, and then we have an actuator that serves the um, um, turbocharger exhaust turbine to control its geometry here. What's illustrated here isn't actually a part of the tin kit. It's there for me to understand how to design that tin. So you'll have actually a cut. There's a cut shown here to fit around that. You may have to open that up a little bit to fit around that part when the time comes. So let's talk about the individual pieces of tin, and I'll talk about them in the order uh, that I would use to install them in this case. We have this piece here. This is the fits underneath the exhaust manifold on the left side. In this case, it's pretty much a flat piece of tin. It has a tab underneath here that has a hole and a slotted hole in it. That hole is going to fit over an open hole in the block that is threaded. I believe this one, I don't recall for certain, but it's probably an 8mm bolt hole. And so that piece will um, slide in here underneath the exhaust manifold, and that hole there, you can see it when I highlight the piece, it should be over the top of that threaded hole, and we can put a bolt in there. I may provide you with a socket head cap screw, I think, for that. I'm not sure if I think so. That will hold that on. I would put it on there and it doesn't get absolutely tight just yet, but you can put that one in place for now. Similarly, there is another piece, overlapping or underlapping piece here that fits under the right side of the manifold. In this case, the goal would be that the right-hand piece, the bluer one, would fit above or on top of the tab from this one so that the air coming across here from left to right would fly over here and not shove dust under any tab or in any corner. So in this case, you can tell by if you look at the screw holes here that the near hole, which is in the left piece, is larger. That's the pilot hole for the screw to go through, and then it should bite into the sides of this back hole, which is the right hand piece in this case. So those two pieces go in. This one also is going to have, on this end of it, it's going to have this little tab that slips up underneath the exhaust manifold and has a hole for a bolt to hold that onto the block. So those two pieces could be slipped in place there and bolted in, screwed together and then bolted to the block. You pretty much have to attach them before we put the next piece on, because that will cover up those bolts. The next piece to go on would be this piece here that's highlighted. It has tabs on its top that wrap around here, and has tabs on the bottom that will fit just inside the first piece. So in this case, when we have that in place, we can put screws through up from the bottom into these holes and lock those two together. Turns out that it's easier to reach this from the bottom than it is from the near side here because of the exhaust turbine and the piping and stuff that's in place here. So it's easier to reach underneath. You may have to do it by feel a little bit, but you can reach underneath and get screws started in those holes and put that piece on there. Similarly, on the other side, this kind of golden looking piece will also fit over the top here and wrap. In this case, the tabs are on the bottom piece because it's easier to reach this uh, by reaching up in here and putting these screws on, but there's not as much in the way here. So this will wrap around and we can put screws here, 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 here around this end, and it'll hold that piece in place. Actually, with those two in place, or those four pieces in place, I guess, we could put this large blue piece that represents the top on. That'll now sit over the top of the other pieces that we've got in place, and you could put screws up this far, and on the other side, that one has a tab that wraps down, and so we'd put the screws through from the front face here and lock those all together. And then we have an enclosure around the exhaust manifold. Next piece to go on would be this blue piece on the side here. It's the upper half of the divider between the exhaust turbine and the compressor turbine. It'll slide down over the turbo bearing here on top, and there are two screw holes here that you can reach from out here. It may take a long screwdriver or a long driver to do that, but you can screw those onto that side panel over the exhaust manifold. With that one in place, you can bring this piece up from underneath, and it will slide inside of that blue one. We look at the holes here. These are the smaller pilot holes. It'll slide inside the blue one, and then you can put one or two or three or four, probably, hopefully at least two, one in here and one out here, screws through from the right side to the left, from the inside of the enclosure to the outside. It'd be nice to be able to put them on from the outside, but the compressor is going to be in the way here. So the only way to get those on is to shoot them through from the right side where it's still open and shoot them through from inside to outside. If you can get both, one, two, three, four in there, two in here and two in here, fine. If you can't reach all those and you can only get one through here and one in there, that's okay, but the more the better. So that'll tie those two together. Then we come over on the right hand side of the exhaust turbine, and we look to put this piece that's highlighted there in place. You can see its flanges that some extend to the left and this one over here to the right. Here we go. You can slip that piece down over the exhaust pipe from the top. And when you get it slid down there, it should fit around that exhaust pipe. There's two screws to put in here to tie it to the manifold cover. You get that one on, you put the matching bottom piece on. It'll slide up around the exhaust pipe from underneath, and you can reach in from the right hand side with a long driver and put screws through here and two through the left side or the outside here. With that, we've got everything but these panels that cover the turbocharger exhaust turbine itself. So now you can put this, let's see if I can get it in center field of view here, this orange piece on from underneath. It will overlap the manifold cover on the bottom and wrap around here. You reach underneath and try and get these screws in. You'll probably have to do that by feel. And then the others can go in place. Before you screw it in place, though, you have a pressure line for the turbocharger oil, the bearing, the oil line to the bearing that goes up through here, and then a return line that comes down through here. And in both of those cases, you want clearance around those oil lines. So on the back one here, this is a steel line. you may need to open this opening up. That's why these fingers are cut there, so that you can open it up as much as necessary to give yourself some clearance around that line. You'd like these fingers to have a parallel aspect, so they're parallel to the oil line and not perpendicular to it. You don't want anything to abrade that, so try to keep a little space there and make sure that there's nothing rough, sharp, or hard that would contact that line and potentially cause it to develop a leak if it vibrated on something. So that one, and then the one up here where the oil line returns the oil back to the crankcase. This is a larger one. It's about 3/4 inch diameter line. Again, you've got fingers here that you can adjust or bend to give you the clearance you need around that return line. You want to do that before you put any screws to hold this in place. It may take it once or twice slipping it in place to make sure you've got clearance there. And then you can put a screw through here and make sure you've still got clearance here. Put a screw through perhaps back here to make sure you've still got clearance there. And then you can put the rest, if you still do, you can put the rest of the screws in place to hold that together. So you can put those screws in from the bottom, hold that piece in place and wrap around here, tie it to the side panels around that area. And when you have that done, we can come in with the top piece, the blue piece. That wraps, let's see, get that centered here. That'll come over from the top, should wrap around that. I hope that there's enough of a cutout to fit snugly or reasonably close around this actuator that's shown here, but you may need to adjust that cut, so you could have to open it up a little bit with the tin snips. If not, great. If you do, fine, you trim around it, no more than is necessary to give you clearance around that component. And then you can screw that one in place. It'll screw down around the edges and over the piece from below here so that it's a relatively tight enclosure there. The next part is to put the enclosure on around the exhaust pipe. I would probably do that by assembling this piece in back. You see this gray piece that's highlighted there with this blue piece on top and this gold piece out here. Those could actually be put together as an assembly of 3 and then be slipped down from above, from on top, over the exhaust pipe. And if you have them assembled together and over the exhaust pipe, you should be able to line them up with the screw holes on the side cover of the turbocharger area here and put screws through there to put on that assembly. Then this orange piece will slide up from the bottom and its flanges will go inside the U-shaped chunk that we just did. Actually, it looks like here it's going to line up and overlap flanges there, here that slides up inside, and you can put screws through to hold that piece in place. It has a tab here at the outer end that you may need to adjust because there's a support bracket that comes through here and you could have to open up or close that bracket to keep it clear of that open up or close this tab to keep it clear of the bracket that fit close as possible to that bracket. Okay, with those in place, let's rotate around here. Here we go. And you have this blue piece that can go on the top, that just screws on here. This gray piece goes onto the back and screws on from the back there, overlaps here, and you can put screws through there. Similarly, the front piece will go on here, screw onto the existing assembly here, and you can put screws through the top into the tab underneath. And then the last piece is this piece with its 2 tabs that will fit up from the bottom, and you can put screws through from the back and from the front to tie it together. These tabs here, not really tabs, but these remaining ends of this top piece and the bottom one underneath here, you can bend those to fit up against the muffler that's right out here. This should kind of parallel the muffler, which runs perpendicular to this assembly. And so you can open these up as necessary to fit up against the muffler. Last things that's the assembly of the tin itself. Last things to consider doing is tightening up any places where you've got large air gaps. We can do that with some of that stiff tin foil tape that we send with the kit. You may need to plug, if the hole has gotten large around this oil line, you can plug that up by taping around it with some of that aluminum foil tape. It won't hurt anything to tighten that up, and then we don't lose too much air around that location. Similarly here, if this hole has gotten larger, maybe you had to shift it because they moved the oil line a little bit on yours, we can tighten that up with some of that tape. You can tighten up around this assembly here with some of that tape if necessary. We also tend to use that tape like Loctite over the screws on the larger lines of screws on the kit, but you can see that in the other videos as well about the installation. So that's the tin kit for a 7120 case combine. If you're looking at that, this will help you in understanding that tin before you tackle it. I tell everybody at the end of these videos that while this kit will greatly reduce the number of smolders you might experience in a volatile crop such as sunflowers or canola or safflower or even soybeans, I can't guarantee that you'll never have a fire in your combine. You can still have a fire start from a stray spark from a failing alternator, an electrical short, a hot bearing, or any other source of heat or spark on the combine. But it will reduce the chronic fires so that your combine acts more like it's combining corn or wheat than if it was combining flowers. So we wish you good luck with your kit. If you have questions or comments, you can post them to me either at the email address harvestfires@outlook.com, or there's a place to send a message at the bottom of the Harvest Fires website where there's contact information. Good luck with your harvest and good luck with your kit. Thank you.